All right, welcome to another edition of the Sports Guys. Really glad you're here this week. We missed you guys last week. We were unable to do a hot takes on Labor Day, but we figured we would store up a really big one for you this week. So this one we're going to be talking about stories really from the past week and a little bit from a week ago as well. We just so many things happening in the world of sports. It's hard to keep track of all of it, but Rob and I are going to do our best to go through what we think are kind of the top 8 or 9 stories. We're going to give you our hot takes. So how you doing, Robbie?
Doing great, thanks. Having a good week.
Good. Any thoughts about kind of week 1 and 2 in college and week 1 in pro? Anything stand out for you?
Well, you know that you and I always laugh about overreaction Monday.
Yeah. But that's the fun part, right?
That is the fun part, and it's also ludicrous to jump off the ship so quickly on people. Obviously, Florida State has a lot to worry about, but I think Clemson got waxed by Georgia, but I wouldn't be too panicky if I'm Clemson. If they get back on track from here, they're going to be fine. I don't think they look great, but I think they definitely opened up a can of this week, and so they're going to be okay. I think Florida State's in big trouble. But I don't think every team who lost is in big trouble. I think it kind of varies. So it's really easy to jump into the panic overreaction mode. And there's also a lot of overreacting for big wins, But, Notre Dame lost. Doesn't mean they're not going to have a huge set of wins this year. Just
True.
It was a devastating upset. So those are emotional. There's an emotional element on top of the reality. So are they eliminated from the playoff? Probably not.
No, I think they still might make it.
It's hard to talk about playoff right now when you lose to a team that's, so much lower than a Power 5. But anyone can beat anyone on a given week, and I think we saw a bunch of those examples the last 2 weeks in a row. In college and in pros. I saw a lot of teams that I feel like are slipping a little, and a bunch of NFL teams this Sunday pulled out victories that were kind of losing. So a lot of comebacks happened where the team that was favored won, but it was real ugly. So
the most surprising win of the whole day, I think, was the Bears. I mean, the fact that they were losing the entire game, and really Caleb ends up with 92 yards passing and a pick.
The Bills, the
and
Bears
they got the win. Do you know how the Bears won that game?
Yeah, defense and special teams.
They won it on a blocked punt and scored on it, and then they won it on a pick six. So essentially, the Titans just completely gave the game away, and the Bears did not deserve to win that game.
I think the Titans are a sneaky, decent team. I think they just don't really know how to win yet. I think the game of the day was Sunday's day. NFL is probably Houston-Indy. I think both those teams are just they're ascending, and you can feel it. A lot of people are projecting Houston up there. That's not a surprise, but I think Indy going up shouldn't be a surprise, but I think it is to some. And then a lot of other strange games, Seattle beating Denver.
I looked at that line, Colts and Texans, and I put $100 down on the over. It was 49 points over. And I just thought to myself, those are two of the most explosive offenses with two brilliant minds as coaches.
Yeah.
And it ends up 39-37. They scored 70-something points. So
yeah,
just great stuff. I mean, the Finns pulled one out. I was really happy about that. The Panthers look like they're the worst team in football. They're my team. I almost took this shirt off before this program, but I thought to myself, that's not very cool to do that. But I'm just completely depressed. They look even worse than last year.
Yeah.
And Bryce Young looks completely like deer in the headlights. He doesn't know what's going on. A lot of times today, there wasn't much pressure on him. He had 3-4 seconds, and he just isn't making the right decisions. He's throwing the ball in the dirt. He's just
hearing footsteps that aren't there, and he can't. There's going to have to be some pretty big, significant changes on the offensive line, I think, and that's not going to happen this season. So I
Yeah.
don't know what you do, but
And it may some of it may be that he's got receivers that aren't getting open, there's not getting separation, that there's some of that, but, I mean, there were a couple times there was tight ends running wide open, and he's got 4 seconds, and he's still missing them. He's either overthrowing them, throwing in the dirt. I don't know what's wrong with him. He's either broken or I'm not sure what it is, but then the Commanders just got blown out by the Buccaneers. Jaden had a
strange.
really good game. He had almost 200 yards passing. He had 88 yards rushing and 2 rushing touchdowns. Really solid effort from a rookie, and yet, they give up so many
Didn't
points
get
that
it done.
he can't compete. It's 37-20.
So what's
So
our hot take on that? I don't
my
know.
my hot take is the Commanders and the Panthers looks like they have the 2 worst defenses in the NFL and have no cornerbacks at all.
Yeah.
You had J.C. Horn for the Panthers get burned on 2 long touchdowns, and on both of them quit around the 15-yard line. He just quit. He just stopped. Didn't even try to tackle him, didn't try to catch him. I don't know. Lot of bad football today. I was really surprised today. There was a lot of blowouts. It felt like college where you have a lot of blowouts in week 1 and week 2. There were a
Yeah,
lot of
I
blowouts
agree.
today. And I don't know why that is. I thought there'd be a lot of parity this year.
I will say that I'll never forget the year that the Patriots were projected to be the worst team in the NFL. They lost 38-0 against the Bills. And they went on to win the Super Bowl that year. So that taught me a valuable example of don't jump into this panic, overreaction Monday stuff, but really sit back and say,
Mm-hmm.
some of these people just played poorly today, and maybe it was just a
And
lot.
in college too. I mean, you saw Clemson get
Absolutely.
blown out by Georgia, and then they go into App, which is a hard place
Yeah.
to play, and they win 66-20.
But surprisingly, Clemson played Georgia pretty tough for a half,
True.
and then just the wheels came off for them. So, it's not like they got blown out the whole game. They got blown out in the second half when things
They don't
kind of
have the
went
talent
wrong.
Georgia has, though. That was pretty clear.
Correct.
They don't have the
No,
talent
correct. Georgia would beat them 9 or 10 out of 10 times, no question.
Mm-hmm.
But Georgia is a special team this year. Clemson fans are not in the same boat as Florida State fans, in my opinion. Florida State fans need to realize that their team is not good this year.
Clemson has a chance to win the ACC still.
Right.
They
That's
still
what
have
I'm
a chance
saying.
in the
Clemson
ACC.
still has a chance to be a decent team.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the year, everyone working together, you might have a shot at one of these SEC powerhouse teams. Who knows? I doubt it, but I'm not going to say it's impossible.
It looks to me like Clemson and Miami are the 2 best teams in the ACC. I was
Correct.
hoping it'd be NC State, and they just have no offense. I don't know what's going on with their offense.
I'm not panicking with
doesn't
NC
exist.
State either. They didn't play well. McCall is not playing well yet. I'm not a huge believer in Robert Anae, so it concerns me. They were talking about how it's very concerning that they're running plays where it's like 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 out of shotgun. That's a huge mistake where you hand the ball off 7 yards back and you give the defense a lot of time to react.
Yeah.
It's a mistake, but I don't love the offense coordinator situation, but I think NC State, Dorn is the kind of coach where just when you think you got him down, he's going to reel off seven wins in a row. So
some of my things I took out of college this past week was there's 3 teams that are clearly above everybody else. They're kind of like semi-pro teams.
yeah,
And that's Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas. Texas goes into the
No
big house in
question.
front of 111,000 people in Michigan. And Michigan's sitting on something like a 34-game winning streak at home.
yeah.
And didn't just beat them, but blew them off the field by 4 touchdowns. And it
What
wasn't
was
even that close.
What was weird was I heard commentators saying that Texas was going to take them out behind the woodshed, and I couldn't really understand where that was coming from, but now I see it. I get it.
This is the national champs.
I think Texas and Georgia might be headed for each other.
And Ohio State. I mean, those
and
3
Ohio
teams.
State. So those 3 really should, Ohio State, Texas, and Georgia should should be on a collision course, and two of them will emerge, and one will come out champs. And I think that's where your national championship is going to come from.
We're going to be doing a 12-team playoff preview this Thursday night, so all you guys definitely tune into that one. It's going to be a good one. And we're going to be looking at who we think are the top 20 teams, who are the ones who actually have a chance to get into the 12-team playoff. And we're going to lead off with those 3 teams because to me that's seed 1, 2, and 3. I don't know which one they'll be, but those are the top 3 seeds. And then, like we said, Notre Dame still has a good chance to get in there. I know this past week when we talked to Armani Edwards, he was very confident that App State would get in. I don't know now after a 66-20 loss to Clemson,
No,
but
it's not going to happen.
We'll see.
I don't blame him for saying it, but that's not going to happen.
But probably the most insightful thing said in that podcast this week was Jeff Reed when he said, "You give me a team after 4 weeks and I'll tell you how they are." He said, "I need to see them for 4 weeks, college and pro." And he said,
You and I talked about this earlier, and I totally agree with him. This keeps you from jumping into the overreaction Monday stuff where it's way too much like, this is my darling team now, and this team is terrible because they got a loss. It's steady things out. If you get 3 out of 4 wins to start your first 4 games, you're doing pretty well. You might have looked terrible week 1, but that's okay. Like, put it behind you, move on. Maybe you had one of your receivers banged up and wasn't really ready to go. There could be a whole bunch of reasons.
Cincinnati Bengals had all kinds of things coming into today, and they did not play well, and they lost.
They looked terrible
in a game they should have won, but that doesn't mean they're a bad team. It's just they had a lot of stuff coming in. They had Jamar Chase's problems, and they had all kinds of other things. So, but you can tell that the Giants are bad. Yep. The Panthers are very bad. And the Commanders,
I don't think that's going to change throughout the season. Although
the Commanders do not have a defense.
If you're lucky, you see some kind of trajectory towards the last 5 games going upward. That's what you're hoping. Is some guys that are trying to put it all together and fighting,
And you see, Baltimore lost, but lost very narrowly. They're going to be a very good team. They still are making the same problems. They're not running the ball enough. Derrick Henry gets 13 carries. It's not enough.
Terrible. It's terrible.
So some of it's coaching.
That's coaching for sure.
You see Jordan Love narrowly lose in Brazil and go down with a knee injury, and he's out 4 weeks. I mean, they could very easily be 0-5 to start.
That field was so bad. I'm going to give that a complete no effect game. Like, that doesn't tell me almost anything other than Jordan Love got hurt. That's not a bad loss for the Packers.
No,
it's a bad loss of your quarterback only.
If they had lost that game by 4 points and Jordan Love was healthy, it would have been a good loss.
It would be fine. Like, it wouldn't be concerning at all. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. So those are the big things I took out of the college, and then out of the pro. Like I said, I was really surprised with the blowouts today. I just didn't see that coming. I thought it was going to be a really kind of high parity year with even the bottom teams getting a little bit better.
I think
I just watched the Chargers. I just watched the Chargers start to blow out the Raiders at the end. Clearly the Chargers are the better team. It looks like there's the haves and have-nots again. You either have a quarterback or you don't.
I think the parity is not going to be on a single day basis. It's going to be week to week. So, like, I think the Raiders are going to look like they're putting together some good weeks, and then they're going to put together some bad weeks. And that's where your parity is going to come from. I think overall, most teams are going to end up around 9 and 8. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Some of the bad teams are going to be a little below that. Some of the good teams are going to be a little above that.
But like
I think parity is going to be in. You're not going to have perfect teams and no win teams. Parity is going to be everyone's around 9 and 8 and slightly lower, slightly better. Right. You know what I mean? That's
Gardner Minshew is a decent quarterback. He almost took the Colts to the playoffs last year, but
you
could see today his limitations with the Raiders. He had all kinds of problems getting the ball to the right people. Sure. He had one ridiculous play where he was trying to recoil the ball back after trying to throw it and ended up throwing it backwards, and then everyone piled on and they lost the ball, and he just had a lot of just stupid plays that you wouldn't see from Richardson, who absolutely lit it up for the Colts today. So
he was good last year. He got hurt, so a lot of people forgot about his talent level. I
yeah,
think they're one of those teams that's going to go like Tom, you and I were talking all week about how 48% of since 1990, 48% of teams that were in the playoffs last year do not go back this year. So that's really, really difficult because it's very easy to put this pencil the same teams back in, right?
yep.
What's difficult is to say this really good team's not going back to the playoffs. This really good team's not going back to the playoffs. But the reality is that's what we're going to have. So if you think about half the teams are not going back, you got your Green Bays and your Texans and all these teams. A lot of them are not going to go back, and some new ones are going in, like the Colts. And so it's week one. We talk about not overreacting. I don't know which teams are going to be the ones that don't make it back and which ones are going to enter the arena for the first time in a while. But there are going to be teams like the Colts that make the playoffs that haven't been in a while.
But you still have kind of like the 15 to 20 teams at the top that have their guy, the guy. And then you have the guys at the teams at the bottom that don't have the guy. And the Raiders are one of those. The Panthers are one of those. The Giants are one of those. Those teams, you can get as much defense as you want. You can get as many running backs as you want. They don't have the guy. And as long as they don't, they're not going anywhere. They're not going to the playoffs. So they're not going to win playoff games. It's just how it is. And the Panthers thought they got their guy last year. They chose the wrong one. The two guys following Bryce Young clearly are going to be bona fide starters. They're very good. And even this year, Caleb, I thought, was kind of disappointing today, but Jaden Daniels was great today. His problem is he doesn't have a defense. So, Panthers made a humongous mistake, and I think that maybe after this year they might have to cut their losses. I hate to say that.
I don't think so.
I don't see him as a starting quarterback. He's not a starting quarterback.
The problem is this. I think he's right on track of where he should be. The problem is the team's not good enough around him. And by the time they get the team good enough around him with all the draft picks, they're going to run out of his rookie contract. And then they're going to be in a terrible situation, kind of like the Cowboys keep finding themselves in, where they have to pay players even though they don't really want to. It's much better to be in a position where
I know you say that, but I've watched Bryce Young now for 18 games, and he's just not a starting quarterback to me. And I've watched a lot of football.
Maybe you know that I told you a long time ago that Bryce Young was not the guy that what's the name?
And I think they can sit here and suffer for another 2 or 3 seasons. They can make us Panther fans suffer, or they can admit they made a mistake and go get somebody in next year's draft, because it looks like they're going to have the number 1 pick.
I think that's overreaction Monday stuff. I think that he looks terrible, but that's what bad rookie quarterbacks look like when they're surrounded by backups.
Last year he had literally no time at all, and so I forgave him.
Every player on that team, you'd have to look at it, but probably 80% of them would be backups on most other good teams. Maybe higher than that. So he's surrounded by backups. He's playing with B team against A team from other teams. So I don't think
looked to me like Canales' offense was working today. He was scheming people open, and Bryce was missing him. He was going high, he was going low, he was going in the dirt, he was thrown out of bounds. Guys were open.
But so was Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson missed a bunch of guys. So
I said the same thing. Lamar Jackson is not Patrick Mahomes.
No question. I mean, he's not. But he brings a special running ability, but I think that gets you hurt. So, I don't know. I think a lot of teams are going to look better next week that look poorly this week. And then there's a couple teams like Florida State that are just not they're not on track.
I noticed that there was only 2 teams who really ran the ball the way I would like to see, because I'm a ground and pound guy, right? And it was really the Eagles and the Packers. They both had over 130 yards rushing and a couple touchdowns. And they just ran. But the other teams, they just give up on it in like the end of the first quarter.
I know it's
You
terrible.
know, all of them, even Dallas, Dallas, Cleveland. I was just watching, and
What about the
Cleveland went
Ravens?
down.
There's no excuse for the Ravens, and they gave up again, even though they lost to the Chiefs because they gave up on the run.
Derrick
It's
Henry
terrible.
had 2 carries in the second half.
I know. It's impossible to explain that. It's impossible to understand what they're thinking. I don't care if they're stacking the box. I get that. But Derrick Henry, you get him because, and you pay a lot of money for him because you're going to run despite 8 or 9 men in the box. That's not going to slow you down. You're going to run him and pound, and then that opens up the pass. So when you have a quarterback like Lamar, who is thought of as an MVP, however, you also look at his throwing abilities, and they're not at the top of the league.
Mm-hmm.
By anybody's definition, he's not a top 5 passer. He's just not.
You know, there were a lot of sacks today. There were a lot of sacks.
The way you get Lamar looking good throwing the ball is you do play action. And he ran the ball too much himself, and they didn't run the ball, so there's no threat of the run, so play action doesn't work. And so you really shoot yourself in the foot. The Ravens, I thought for sure they learned their lesson. They went out, got Derrick Henry. We'll never do that again. And then game 1, they don't run again. It's like, you guys
really
have just lost your minds, and, there's no saving you until you change something massive.
My last comment about today is that I noticed the offensive line play across the whole league was really bad. I mean, it's just they're not run blocking well. They're not guarding the quarterbacks well. The only quarterbacks who had a chance are the ones who were scrambling out of there and buying time. Ironically, Bryce Young probably had some of the most time in the entire league. He had 3-4 seconds on most plays. He just couldn't hit anybody. But most of the guys were just scrambling for their lives throughout the entire league. Even Tua was scrambling for his life. And I don't know what's wrong with the offensive line play right now. Maybe they're just not caught up yet. Maybe it's going to take them a couple weeks to kind of get in the groove. That's a possibility. But the pass rushers just teed off today. And most teams had 4 or 5 sacks. So, interesting. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the big stories. I want to get your hot takes. Here we go. All right, so this is our hot takes for September 9th, 2024, right at the beginning of the football season. Let's take a look at story number 1, and that is the epic opening game. The Chiefs defeated the Ravens 27-20 in Kansas City. Tying TD play was nullified when a Ravens player toe was on the line in the back of the end zone. I got a picture of it right there. You can see it. It wasn't even an inch. It was like half an inch, essentially.
Yeah.
And then my take from this game was that Mahomes is in just a different league than Jackson as a passer. I know Jackson has 2 MVPs, and that's great, and he gets almost all of his explosive plays in the running game. And I just don't know if he'll ever get over the Mahomes hump the way he plays and his style of play versus Mahomes. Mahomes just a couple of those passes at the end of the game, he did hit this last one here, but the 2 before that he missed completely, wide open. And I don't know. I'm really curious about it. Game set the all-time highest viewership with 35 million watching. So you can tell there was a huge pent-up demand of people that really wanted to see football. You see a kind of a cocky quote from Isaiah Likely, who's, to me, the standout player for the Ravens in that game. He's like, if this is the best they got, good luck in the postseason. And then another quote here about all fantasy football players are upset because Mark Andrews isn't being used.
Yeah, I'm upset.
And then I have a picture there of Pacheco, who just went off. He absolutely just destroyed the Ravens defense. And then you have a controversy that all the Ravens fans are saying that the refs were on the Chiefs' side. So what were your thoughts about this epic opening game?
Oh, it was a great game. I felt like game plan for Ravens, again, seriously mismanaged. I do think reffing was not balanced, and I'm not a reffing conspiracy guy, but it was pretty incredible how they were calling a bunch of formation problems on the Ravens in the first half, and you could see clearly that the Chiefs were in the same formations where the right tackle for the Chiefs was way too far back, and they weren't calling it on them. I don't know how you explain this stuff, but when the Chiefs go to the Super Bowl every year and they get 0 holding penalties and there's such egregious holding, I don't know how to explain it other than the conspiracy theorists have some points.
And
I
I
try
can
not to
see that.
I try not to
can see
join
that.
in all that, but I can't explain some of it too. Like
I can
some
see
of it's
that, but
pretty bad.
there were 2 major hits on Mahomes out of bounds they didn't call either. So I don't know. I just think they might have had a bad game. I don't know.
The refs, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, there was 2 major
Yeah,
hits on
maybe.
Mahomes out of bounds that should have been 15 yards, and neither one was called. So I
Yeah,
don't know. I don't
I
know.
don't know
I
either.
think
But
I think it kind of evened out in the end. I know the Ravens fans are not happy, but
yeah, I know
do
they're
you
not
think?
happy, and I don't want to join in just conspiracy theory for the sake of conspiracy theory, but I feel like um, the reffing was not even. And then there were times in the second half they were trying to probably even it up a little, but I think by that time you probably have some issues where the Ravens already feel kind of like this isn't really even handed.
Yeah.
But all I know is that there's no question that the defensive coordinator for the Chiefs ran down the line, called a timeout, and they didn't call it. And so that's just indisputable that was
Mhm.
should have been allowed that timeout.
Mhm.
Um, and I know that's kind of nitpicky, but I think the holding calls on the Ravens and all the illegal formation calls on the Ravens and none of that against the Chiefs. You can point to a bad call where the Chiefs got away or the Chiefs suffered a bad call, but there are so many for the Ravens that
Yeah.
it probably influenced the game. But
So we
I
saw
thought
this epic matchup.
it was an amazing game.
It was an incredible game. I loved every minute of it. We
Mhm.
saw this epic matchup in the AFC Championship game, and we, of course, saw it in this first opening game. You think we'll see it again in the playoffs this year?
I do.
I mean,
I
doesn't
do.
it
I
feel
think
like
the
these
Ravens are
teams?
back to running the ball, which they went away from for whatever reason again. And I think they're going to get a lot of wins in a pretty weak division. I mean, Pittsburgh is beatable. Cincinnati looks pretty bad. Not great, at least.
Mhm.
And then who else is in that division?
You got Texans, you
Uh,
got
yeah.
Colts,
So
Chargers.
I think the Ravens are still one of the ones you need to beat to move forward. And you know,
It feels like these 2 teams are kind of
Yep.
both at their prime right now, and they're both gonna continue to always bump heads in the AFC playoffs because
Yeah,
one or the other wants to go to the Super Bowl. So, yeah,
yeah.
it feels that way for sure. What do you think about 35 million people watching on a Thursday night?
People are starving for
That's incredible.
football. That's
That's
not
incredible.
surprising at all.
What a number.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, that's you
It was
know,
probably more than that too. All right, let's go to
yeah,
the second item here. Eagles outlast the Packers in Brazil. This was also another incredible high-scoring affair. Both offenses exploded with big plays, and both QBs left a lot of plays on the field. Both of them had some mistakes. Both of them missed some wide-open receivers. You had Jordan Love hurt with 5 seconds left, and it looks like he's going to be out about 4 weeks with a sprained MCL. And so they handed the ball to Patrick Willis with 5 seconds left to try to take him 49 yards, which wasn't really fair, of course.
no,
Both defenses looked really terrible. I mean, surprisingly terrible, to the point where I really have to wonder if either of these teams is truly a championship contender because of their defenses. Um, I mean, I don't know what happened to the Eagles' defensive line. They have a bunch of number 1 picks up there from Georgia. And the Packers DBs looked like they just were horrible. They just couldn't cover anybody. So, any thoughts about this game?
um,
You mentioned the field too.
yeah. I think the field played a huge part. I think game one is you put your veterans out there with not much preseason anymore. So a lot of times, game one is sort of like a preseason game. It has a lot of the elements of it where you're trying to put it all together for the first time. Um, I think normally defenses are ahead of offenses this time of year, but that's not always the case. So I don't know. I think both these teams are good teams who should be playoff bound. Obviously, the injury to Love is devastating. However, 4 weeks. I mean, 4 weeks is kind of a long time where you can get off on the wrong track. If they go 0-4,
Or 0
that's
and or
pretty
0
bad.
and 5. What if he doesn't come back to
Or
week
0 and
6?
5.
If they're 0 and 5, yeah,
That's
that's really
pretty
tough.
devastating. Like that
Yeah.
sends your team's confidence level down. And even though you get your quarterback back, it's an uphill battle.
Right.
Every game in the NFL matters because you're going to get beaten sometimes. The chance of going undefeated is almost zero. So I think that you got to see really good teams going against each other. What I notice now is weaknesses are being exposed, and I think that both teams' weaknesses were on display. And I
Look
think
at these 2 running
they got to
backs,
go to
Rob.
work.
I mean, Josh Jacobs for the Packers and Saquon Barkley for the Eagles just absolutely torched the other defense. I mean, and look at some of the gaps we're talking about. I mean, there's nobody anywhere close to them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they were just gashing each other's defenses, and I don't know. It's very concerning. If I'm an Eagles fan, I'm a little upset. I know I won the game, but it was not good. It was not
Yeah.
good. Not a championships level performance. And then you have Jalen Hurts with 2 interceptions and a fumble lost. I mean, I feel like the Eagles got kind of lucky to get out of Brazil with a win here.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Eagles are a solid team. I think they have weaknesses. I think Hurts is wildly paid and also
Overrated.
overrated.
Me too.
I think he's not going to win the game for you. You're just hoping he doesn't lose the game for you. And they pay him like a top 5 quarterback. I think he's around 15th. So I've never bought
You
into
know,
all this hype.
I
That we
noticed he's running a lot less than he did 2 years ago. He's not running it nearly as much. He's trying to be a pocket passer only.
Yeah.
And that takes away one of the things that made him special was his running ability. And also, apparently, they're struggling with the tush push without Jason Kelsey. So
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see. But it looks to me like the Eagles got some work to do. Still a very good team. Had a really good draft.
I think their
But
defense is going to be better than what it looked like in that game.
would you
So
take a second-year starter, Jordan Love, or would you take Jalen Hurts, both fully healthy? Which one would you take if you're a GM?
Jordan Love.
Me too. Me too.
And then you add in the salaries, I'm going
Well,
Jordan Love all
Jordan
day.
got paid too, but I mean,
Yeah, he did, but he's less than
a little bit. Yeah. I don't know. This was a great game, though. I mean, I have to say, for the first 2 games of the year, pretty solid. And I hope Jordan gets back soon because I think Packers are really
me too.
exciting.
They need him. Yeah, they need him.
So next one is Texas a national title threat? Go into the big house, beat Michigan, blow them off the field. Texas Longhorns Quinn Ewers, who used to be with Ohio State his first year but transferred. Is he better than most people think? And are the
Yes.
Texas Longhorns a title contender?
Yes. They are.
There you go.
I mean, they're loaded. They have a completely rebuilt team. They're strong at quarterback, multiple levels. They have talent everywhere. I think the 3 best teams in college football are very clear, and I think that these 3 teams have to work out which one's going to sit out during the national championship game. Ohio State, Texas, and Georgia. There's no doubt about it. They're way better than the other teams.
I completely agree. And can the Wolverines recover? I mean, this is the defending national champs.
Yes, but I think that they're not headed for a national championship game.
Don't you see a couple more losses on their schedule, like Ohio State?
Maybe, yeah, maybe one more.
Yeah.
I think they can rally and get a bunch of wins, but I think the national title idea is not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I think Texas definitely put everybody on notice in this game. I was really impressed. I watched the entire thing. So some of the other teams that have been struggling is the Clemson dynasty over. They had their lopsided loss to Georgia, but then, of course, follow that up with a big win over App State. And then, of course, you have Notre Dame that was very disappointing yesterday, losing to Northern Illinois. It was really a shocking upset. A lot of people think maybe the second worst or best upset in college football history after App State's win over Michigan. Then you have,
Yeah.
of course, Florida State you mentioned. You had LSU start really poorly. Florida start really poorly. What about some of these big name teams? I mean, are some of these teams' dynasties over?
Well, I think Florida's better than they played last week, but I think Clemson's still strong. You don't want to mess with them. Notre Dame, I don't really know how you explain a bad day when you're just not expecting a team to bring what they did. Was it Northern Illinois?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to recover from a loss like that. I do think it's the worst loss I've seen since App State beat Michigan.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Me personally, that's
everyone was saying Notre Dame was going to go 12-0 and be in the college football playoff, and then they lose to Northern Illinois, which is, I think they're ranked the 140th team in Division One.
Yeah.
Do you know who the most famous Northern Illinois player in their history is?
No.
Tony Romo.
Yeah,
he played for them. Yep.
He was a good player. Tony Romo gets a lot of flack, but he was very talented, smart player. Not a world champion, but just a really good quarterback.
Apparently, LSU has had some really disappointing losses last year and this year, and especially this first one to USC was really disappointing because USC is not that great. And a lot of people are wondering whether Brian Kelly's really the guy there. You know, there's some rumbling among Tiger faithful because they're used to going to national titles. They're used to going to the SEC championship game, and they're really starting to wonder. And of course, Coach Norvell in Tallahassee's he's in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I think that they have a lot to worry about in Tallahassee.
So which of these teams, Clemson, Notre Dame, Florida State, Florida, LSU, out of those five, which of those do you think has the best chance at the college football playoff?
Clemson.
Clemson? Okay. I think it's Notre Dame.
It's a weak division. But I think Notre Dame also. I would say both of those.
I think it's Notre Dame and then Clemson second because I think Clemson might still be in the ACC title game. So
yeah,
it's going to be interesting. We'll see. Clemson, I still think could get knocked off by like a Georgia Tech or someone like that. We'll see.
Yeah, it's possible. NC State or something.
So another big story came out of last week was Cam Ward in Miami. Comes over from Washington State and immediately puts Miami on the map. They were already building something there with their new coach, but it really looks like they're the best team in the ACC this year. Any thoughts about Miami and their return to prominence?
Well, I don't want to overreact, but it seems to me like they're the best team in the ACC. I think they're talented on both sides of the ball. They have good coaching. They have some swagger, and it's not going to take long for them to be the U again in terms of a certain amount of intimidation factor that they bring in, excitement, and they're talented. So they've done a good job in the transfer portal, and they are a desired destination to play. So they're in a weak division, and they're a powerhouse. So I think it's all laid out for them. The big dogs in the ACC are down. You know, a lot of people are saying the top is down and the bottom is up. You know, the Georgia Techs and the weak teams. Virginia's 2-0. Some of the bad teams in the ACC are doing a little better, and the better teams are down. Florida State.
Man, I was so happy Virginia beat Wake. That was a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that was huge.
2-0. Yeah. You said they were going to be a little better this year.
Yep.
You were right.
Yeah, I felt like they have continuity.
My hot take here is that Miami's going to win the ACC, and they're going to be one of the top 4 seeds in the college football playoff. That's my big take.
I agree with that.
And then I wanted to also talk about Travis Hunter. Everyone assumed he was going to be the number one receiver taken in the draft next year and the best college receiver in college football. Obviously, very, very good. But we have this other kid who's been emerging from Arizona. His first game, he had 10 catches, 304 yards, and 4 touchdowns for Arizona. And then yesterday, he had over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he's got 500 yards and 6 touchdowns in 2 weeks. So what are your thoughts about this guy? Could he maybe be the best receiver in college football?
Yeah, I think this is officially week 2, and I
Mhm.
think they're just beginning to draw the outlines of the painting, and so
Mhm.
anything's possible. I think a lot of great players are starting to emerge. You're maybe seeing a couple plays out of them, or maybe this last week was the first time some of them have shown themselves. But there's a lot of good players coming up. Um,
This kid McMillan is a sophomore, and if he continues at this pace, he's going to have the greatest receiver season in history. And so we'll
yeah,
see. We'll see if he can
and
do it.
I think it's way too early to extrapolate out
Yeah.
like that.
Yep.
But I do think that the opening is there for him to seize the mantle, and if he does, then he's gonna be the next guy. So
He might feel pressure to come out this year instead of staying for another year, just because the
yeah, I
iron's
don't
hot.
know. I can't predict how good he'll be the whole season. Is
Hmm.
he gonna get nicked up? That takes away from a lot of his numbers. Is he going to struggle against certain kinds of defenses? Is he gonna struggle against top level corners? Um, there's so many things that need to play out to go there, but he's on his way towards that. And then who knows if he walks through that door or not.
What's your thought about why Colorado's struggling this year? I mean, they got blown out by Nebraska, barely won in week 1. Um, what is it about that team? There's just something missing. They have these 2 great players.
I think that Dion has been a little strange. And I think a lot of parents are urging their kids to go play for other coaches. I don't
Mhm.
think they're recruiting very well. I know they're very active in the transfer portal, but it's
Mhm.
hard. You'd rather organically build a team from scratch and add a few pieces from the transfer portal instead of
Mhm.
trying to build a whole team from the transfer portal. And I think Dion turns his team over too much, and I think it fluctuates a lot. And I don't think he's a very good recruiter of linemen. He never
Mm.
has been.
That's what it's all about. You just
And I think
mentioned.
that really comes down to letting Shador and the skill position players that he seems to recruit very well, let them shine by having enough time to do what they need to do.
They're
Shador
getting
is now
whipped in the
hurt and he's
trenches.
out, and the wide receiver is dependent on there being enough time to run his route. So I think the fact that they can't recruit linemen very efficiently really hurts Colorado, and I think that Dion's not a great recruiter of the trenches, and so I think that his teams are always going to be very limited.
They're gonna be very limited for exactly what you said. They get whipped at the line yesterday by Nebraska. I mean, on both sides of the ball. Absolutely whipped. Shador was running for his life the entire game. And that's too bad because I know the average college football fan wants to watch Colorado because they want to see these exciting players make great plays. But it's really hard when Shador's on his butt the whole game to have a lot of great plays. So,
Yeah, and not enough time. Even if he's not down, he's throwing the ball away or
and they have
running for his
they
life.
they have a schedule with 5 or 6 teams that are better than Nebraska on it. So I don't know. I don't see where a lot of wins are coming.
Hmm.
So we'll see. So next one is Steph Curry's the first $60 million man in the NBA. And just incredible to think that he makes more than the entire Oakland A's baseball team does that has 42 players on it. So this deal, essentially, he was going to be good through 2025, but this takes him through 2027 when he'll be 39 years old. And he'll be like I said, the first $60 million man in the NBA. We just got our first $60 man in the NFL as well. But Any thoughts about this? Is this because he had such an amazing Olympics? Is it Golden State kind of thanking him as he closes out his career?
All those things. I think that this is definitely a tipping your hat to, the chosen son of the Golden State
Mhm,
community. Loves him, appreciates him hanging in there with him,
mhm.
wanting him to end his career there. Thanks for all the championships and the great years and the amazing
The
performances,
3 rings, yeah.
the 3
Mhm,
rings.
mhm.
It's a pat on the back. It's a thank you. It's a you packed the stadium. Without you, ticket sales will plummet.
And I have to
Um,
think his
so
performance in the Olympics didn't hurt as
and the
this was getting
Olympics,
done. Yeah.
showed that he's a legend, and you don't really need to be reminded of that. But contracts are really mostly a looking forward event, not a looking backwards. So like
Mhm.
contracts have moved from where you get rewarded for what you've done in the past to more about what you could do in the future. That's been a transition over the last 5 to 10 years
Mhm.
in multiple sports actually. Um,
Is
football,
NBA and NFL really that much more popular than baseball? I guess so, huh?
yes, yes, yeah. One and two are much more popular than three, four, or five. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, TV revenue, stadium revenue, etc.
So do you
Uh,
think he and Dak are overpaid?
oh, dramatically, but especially Dak. I would say Curry's probably kind of worth it. You have 5 players starting and 10 on the team. Um,
Mhm,
he's a difference maker. Dak, a 53-man roster that you have to spread the resources around.
mhm,
He's never done anything that significant in terms of wins. He's got some nice wins, but almost nothing in the playoffs. He can have a loaded team and they're still going to lose. Um,
mhm.
he's wildly overpaid. So, but they were afraid of the alternative.
Oakland always has the lowest payroll in the major leagues. I wonder if that's gonna change when they move to Vegas finally. I wonder if they're gonna amp that
Probably.
up and try to get a really good team.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
they want to they want to be showy. They want to have great players that bring in people from out of town, and yeah,
I feel like this is Curry's last contract. I think the only way he'll play
yeah.
after 39 is he might come. A lot of people here in Charlotte, where I live, are praying that he'll come and play 1 year for the Hornets. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but if he did, that might be the 1 year he'd play other than the Golden State Warriors.
I
So,
wouldn't be surprised if he did. It would make sense to me if he did. But at the same time, he strikes me as a guy that wants to finish in Golden State.
yeah, probably so.
Finish my career one place. I'm beloved there. He's already beloved in Charlotte.
He's
His
gonna be
dad
a
played
Hall of
there.
Famer. Gonna be a Hall of
He's
Famer.
a Hall of
Yeah,
Famer.
yeah,
He doesn't need to play in Charlotte to put an
yeah.
exclamation mark on his being loved in that city. So
Mhm. So you think he's worth and you think Dak is overpaid. Okay. You know what? I
I
actually
think
agree with you. I
I
agree
think
with you.
he's close to worth it, and I think Dak's not even close to worth it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the 49ers this past week. They had 2 guys that were at risk of not playing, but ended up getting both of them under contract. First one is the best offensive tackle in the league, Trent Williams, signed an $82 million extension, 3 years. He admits that he's not in football shape. So I don't know how many plays he's actually going to play on Monday night against the Jets. He says he's going to play, but can he go out there and play every snap? Probably not. So that's kind of the concern you have with these guys that hold out and don't play at all. I mean, not even one snap in the preseason. So I don't know. We'll see how he performs. Obviously, as the year gets going, he'll be again probably the best tackle in football. And then you got Brandon Aiyuk, who became one of the highest paid receivers in the league, 4 year, $120 million extension. Apparently, he was literally about to sign the paperwork for his trade to Pittsburgh, and it was done. And for some reason, right at the last minute, he decided not to sign it and called his agent and said, I want to go back to the 49ers. Any thoughts about why he would do that right at the last second? Decide he
I'm
wanted to
not
go back?
sure. I heard some rumors about what went down. I don't really know what's true. I think he feels much better about the quarterback situation and the offensive line and the direction of the team. The coaching is good in Pittsburgh. That's not a problem, but I think that the trajectory of the Niners, you got one more year and you have a good shot at winning the Super Bowl. And if you do, you're definitely going to get paid huge. So
And what are they going to do with all these guys when they have to pay Brock Purdy next year? What's going to happen? They're going to have to trade some of these guys, right?
no question.
I assume.
There's going to be a lot of defensive players that need to go, unfortunately. Greenlaw and all these guys, none of their contracts make any sense in the context of paying Purdy and Aiyuk and Warner and all these guys. So
Debo.
they're going to have to get rid of some guys next year. This is the last shot. That's why they went on and paid Aiyuk. Get him in here. Let's get the Super Bowl and let's worry about it next year.
And Trent Williams. They basically signed both
Trent
of these
Williams.
guys thinking this is the end of their window. That's what they're thinking.
This is it. This is the last year. Now we have to decide when we pay Purdy, 6 stars or 7 stars are going to have to be sent out the door.
Right.
And that's going to hurt really badly.
I know it is. So my
it
question to you is, does these two signings put them back in the pole position in the NFC?
I think so, yes.
I do too.
I don't think the signings do necessarily, but I think they're already in the pole position and the signings solidify it.
Right. These are two of their key critical ingredients.
Yeah, especially Trent Williams.
Yeah, for sure. So the next one is Ceedee and Dak both re-signed as well. Dak actually re-signed today. Dak Prescott becomes the highest paid player at $60 million per year with $231 million guaranteed. Lamb got $34 million per, makes him the second highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. What are your thoughts about these two signings? And does this, make Dallas better, or does it just keep them in parity? What does it do for Dallas?
I think they're better this year, but I think this is sabotaging their future. That's pretty much how I would explain that. I think that they're, CeeDee Lamb, it's mismanagement by Jerry Jones, who's the GM, to allow his 3 best players to come up ready for a big contract at the same time. And that's what he's done. He allowed CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, and what's his name?
Micah, who hasn't been paid yet, by the way.
He hasn't been paid yet. He's going to want out. This was all avoidable if they had kind of staggered the contracts a little bit and not allow them to. It seems like Jerry Jones just doesn't know what he's doing as a GM. He's a good owner. He's a very good businessman. He knows how to make the brand sizzle, but he does not know.
And he does make a lot of money. So yeah, from the business side, he makes a lot of money.
He's a great businessman. He knows how to make that sizzle, but he does not know how to make the business decisions that are required.
The football operations.
What my team's going to be like out there. Yeah. So
I will say they looked very impressive today, but I still don't think they're as good as the 49ers or the Eagles or probably the Lions. There's a couple teams ahead of them, and I don't think these re-signings do anything to get them over the top of those couple teams. I think it just puts them in parity of what they already had.
Right.
That's my take on it. Obviously, Dak is not worth this, and I don't think any receiver, whether it's Justin Jefferson or CeeDee Lamb or any of these guys, are worth the kind of money they're getting. Aiyuk, these guys are getting like quarterback money now. So it's crazy. Let's talk about our overreaction Sunday. You were just talking about it. My first one I mentioned earlier is Bryce Young falls flat and the Panthers get embarrassed by the Saints. And talked about why he may be the worst quarterback in the NFL. And there's a couple things on this stat that show why. His hand size, his decision making, his athleticism is not very good. He doesn't have escapability. He doesn't have a big arm. There's just so many reasons that I'm just really wondering why these guys who get paid to do scouting would have made him the number one pick. I just don't quite understand it. And after watching him
Well,
play for 2 years,
yeah. No, I
it's just
agree.
it's confusing.
I've constantly said that they made a huge mistake back then, but now that you've made the mistake, I think it's salvageable going forward. But expectations have to match. I think they're going to be fine, but they need to take pressure off the quarterback position by running the ball more and using the tight end more. And I think until they do that effectively, they're not going to be okay. They're not going
And
to look
also,
okay.
and also, he can't solve the defensive problems. I mean, the defense was just a mess today.
Yeah, the defense wasn't
Absolute
great.
mess.
I think it just
Yeah.
affects the whole team, you know?
Right.
I
And
really
then,
think
and then almost as embarrassing as Bryce Young was to watch Daniel Jones today, who's supposed, he's a $42 million quarterback,
yeah, he's
and to
terrible.
watch him just deer in the headlights, and it was embarrassing.
Yeah.
He made, Darnold look like a Pro Bowler or something. So do you think these are the two worst quarterbacks, or do you think there's somebody else below these guys? I'm just
Daniel
talking right
Jones.
now.
Well, for me, it's always what are they able to do and what do they cost? To me, the dollar amount attached to them is important. So Purdy costs nothing. So he's the best quarterback in the NFL because output wise, he's leading the NFL and his salary is less than any backup. So
What if you're just talking performance? I'm just talking
if you're
performance.
if just performance, I still think those guys are at the bottom, especially Daniel Jones. And I think Bryce Young has a long way to go. I think it's too early for him. Just like the Steelers were able to salvage Justin Fields' career. It's it has to do with situations. It has to do with all kinds of factors. And I think we're too quick to give up on a young quarterback sometimes. And I think that they should not have given up on Justin Fields. I think the Bears would be way better off. And so would the Panthers if they had used the same model, which is get a bunch of stars and studs in here, get loaded up, and then go get your quarterback. I think the Bears should have not used all this capital to go get another quarterback and get rid of the one that was young. Go get wide receivers and linemen and defensive
when you
players.
talk about performance, I was talking about pure performance on this slide, but if you're talking about performance versus dollars, you'd have a lot more guys on this slide from today. I mean, you had Deshaun Watson looked pretty horrendous today, and he's getting paid, $55 million a year. He was just horrendous today, and there was a couple other. I mean, Justin Herbert looked like a deer in the headlights today. He did not look good at all.
If I'm going to tell you who's the worst quarterback in the NFL when you have to take into account money, it has to be Deshaun Watson and probably Daniel Jones. Those are the two.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
They're the most overpaid and the least productive.
But I have to tell you, the quarterback play today was not very good, like across the board. And I understand
That's
why
not surprising for me in week one. It's just not. Or, the way it takes offenses time to gel, to get the timing down. Offenses are behind the defenses this time of year most of the time.
And the defenses are fresh. And later in the year, they're worn down.
They're healthy, fresh.
Yeah.
They haven't been in huge collisions.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, the best game of the day today was Texans and Colts. I mean, that was a great game. And both quarterbacks played really well. Man, I wish my Panthers had one of those guys.
Both those teams have very, very good rosters, good young quarterbacks, and they're built the right way. So
this was
it's a joy to watch that,
It is. I love watching it. So this was an interesting graphic came out this week, and it's the most overrated QBs according to other players. They took a survey. There was a secret poll on NFL.com, and they had 8,000 respondents. 8,000 players responded to this. And this is how they had him ranked. And it kind of surprised me. Josh Allen as the top most overrated. I'm not sure about that. Jalen Hurts at 2, Tua tied at 2, Herbert, Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, and Brock Purdy. So any of these you agree with or any of these you disagree with in terms of the players' rankings?
I disagree with most of them. I think Josh Allen is not overrated, but I do think he has limitations. So he's like almost overrated. They think of
Okay.
him as some guy who's gone and won a bunch of Super Bowls, and he's just not. He's not on that level. I don't think he's ever going to. I think he's
Mhm.
a very good quarterback who makes the guys around him better. But I think when you hit the playoffs, his ability to run people over is just less. So
Mhm.
I don't think he's in there. I don't think Brock Purdy is. He's paid nothing. His expectations are nothing, and he leads the league in every category.
Mhm.
So he's not overrated. Um, some of the other guys, definitely Deshaun Watson is overrated. He's seen as a top 5 quarterback, paid like a top 3 quarterback, and he's terrible. I mean, he's literally still terrible, not just terrible one season, but
He is
he's
pretty
gone
bad.
on multiple seasons of bad. So
I think Jalen Hurts is also overrated. I really
very
do.
overrated, very
Yeah.
overpaid, very overrated. But he's steady, solid, good leader. He's got qualities that you want. So he's a good quarterback. He's just not a great quarterback.
I see
He's
why
paid like
they
a great one, but
I
he's a
see
good
why
one.
they put I see why they put Kyler in here too. I mean, I think that he's an incredible athlete, but you're asking the players who play against these guys every single day, and he hasn't lived up to the hype. Kyler Murray.
I guess. I mean,
Just my
I
take.
didn't hear all that much hype when he came out. The problem with Kyler Murray is that he's able to do these highlight reel plays, and so you think he's a great quarterback, and he's not a great quarterback. He's just he's okay. He's decent,
And then I have to say
but
with Tua, I mean, it's his arm strength. You know, that's what most everybody who knows football says. It's just he doesn't have that
yeah,
big gun of an arm. And then with Justin Herbert, after watching his game today, I see why they're saying this. He's okay. He's decent. He's not bad. He's good, but I don't put him in the top 5 anymore. I really don't. He's got some real
mm.
limitations. He was missing receivers all over the place. So I don't know. Maybe that's just timing, or I don't know
Brand
what
new
that is. But
offense,
yeah,
timing.
maybe, maybe.
We'll see. Takes
Trevor
4 weeks
Lawrence.
to really shake out.
Trevor Lawrence. I mean, he's been in the league 5 years. Just got paid. He's been to the playoffs once. You know. I mean, I could see him being on this list.
Yeah,
Oh,
maybe.
interesting list. Interesting. I don't agree with all of them, but I understand some of
Mm.
them for sure.
Yeah.
So, any other thoughts, hot takes for this week before we close out?
How about Virginia being 2-0? That's
Love it.
good. Notre Dame's loss is epic. I think they can bounce back from it, but it's a big one. That's a they'll be talking about that one all season. Florida
It was
State's
huge.
bad. Still can beat some good teams, but they're not doing anything.
Mhm.
Those are the majority of the big stories, I think.
It looks to me like there's just not that much parity in the NFL like I thought there was going to be this year. You've got the has and the have-nots. You either have the QB or you don't. And defenses, teams either have a defense or they don't. So it's either a quarterback or a defense. They either have one or the other or both. The championship teams have both. And then on the college side, same thing. It's the 2 or 3 teams in every conference that are at the top, and everybody else is just kind of in the middle. They can all beat each other.
Mm.
So there's not as much parity as I was expecting this year, is what it looks like to me.
I think there's a lot of parity. I think that there's going to be a lot of teams around 9 and 8, which means that teams beat each other. There's no like runaway favorite, undefeated team. And I think we're in week 1, and the overreaction stuff is real. There's a real overreaction. I love watching all the big guys come out tomorrow talking about this team is terrible and that team is going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And
And we
it's so
caution against it.
ridiculous.
We caution
It's so
against it.
ridiculous knowing that the next 4 weeks are going to be this roller coaster of teams winning and losing and winning and losing. And teams don't have a personality yet because they're working out new things. New players have come in. Things have changed. Injuries.
I think what I'm saying is different from what you're saying. You and I are looking at parity a different way. The way you're looking at parity, 10-7, 9-8, 8-9, 7-10. I agree. There can be a lot of teams in that range.
That's parity.
If you want to call that parity, that's fine. I agree with that.
Yeah,
But
because anyone can beat anyone else on a given week.
what I'm talking about is there's very few great teams who can make it all the way. And I was thinking there would be more this year. I was thinking there'd be 8 or 10 teams that you could.
I disagree because I know that half of the teams that made the playoffs last year are not going to make it this year, and half the teams that didn't make the playoffs last year are going to make it this year, which means there's parity, which means that teams that last year looked terrible might be decent this year and possibly headed for the playoffs, and teams that you think are no-brainers to go aren't. And so I think that's parity.
But I agree. But a team squeaking in.
If we feel like the Chiefs not losing again, or if they win it all, there's still parity in the NFL because people are going to beat the Chiefs along the way. They're not going to be 17-0.
But if you have a team squeaking in at 9-8, how much of a chance do they really have to go all the way?
Well, that's kind of how the Giants were when they won with good defense.
Used to happen a long time ago. I just think today you've got 3 or 4 teams in both conferences that really have a legitimate shot because they have a quarterback and they have a defense and they have a running game. They have all the elements it takes and a premier tight end, right? So
what I would say is I don't even think we know who's going to be in the Super Bowl yet, much less.
True.
I think there's parity. Like we're watching.
But you and I talked about before the draft what the model is to become a great team, all the different elements you need. And my point I'm trying to make is that fewer teams this year built to that model than I thought they would, from what I saw today. We'll see.
We'll see. I think a lot of the good teams came back and barely squeaked out wins, and I don't think that bodes well for them. But at the same time, maybe next week they come and blow people out.
Yep.
So I think it's a 4-week roller coaster, and then you start to settle into some kind of pattern.
We're going to have to do a show in 3 weeks after the 4th week, and we'll do a show. We'll talk about Jeff Reed's theory and see, what are the teams that really are good and have a real shot. Like you said, in week 1, every city thinks they've got a shot.
Well, that's the exciting part is every team looks at their drafts. Oh man, we got this wide receiver and we added this linebacker. That's going to shore up our defense.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
It doesn't work really like that. It kind of does, but it kind of doesn't. But at the same time, no team is terrible right now. The Giants could beat some people, they're pretty bad. But if Daniel Jones has a good game, the defense plays hard and they play kind of a wimpier opponent, they could win. So they're not going to get 0 wins. They're going to get less than others. So I think I
kind of look at the Giants as that team that last year was bad and this year lost some of their key pieces like Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, that hurts badly.
And they were thinking Daniel Jones would have a big bounce back year this year. I just don't see it. He doesn't have an offensive line.
Back in the day, Tom, the Bears and the Niners used to be like 1-15. There's not teams like that anymore. There's teams that get 3, 4, and 5 wins, but nobody gets 1 win.
Yeah, that's
there's
true.
Parity. There's parity. There's teams that squeak into the Super Bowl by a route of barely getting there. Everyone can beat each other, so it's pretty
Man,
exciting.
I was pumped for you that the Dolphins pulled it out today. I was really excited about that.
Me too. Me too.
I saw some really bad football from my Panthers and some really bad football from my Commanders. I was really happy about the Dolphins. I was disappointed that the Cowboys blew out the Browns, but not that surprised by it.
Not surprised at all.
And then our Wahoos are 2-0, man, so it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, this was a good weekend for sports for us.
No question about it.
Well,
guys, check us out on Thursday night. We're going to be doing our episode on the 12-team college playoff and who we think is going to make it to those 12 slots. And otherwise, thanks for joining us for Hot Takes. We'll see you guys next time.
Yeah.